Welcome to the data session, Friday actually. We have this session every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault, data-driven applications, data mining, cloud computing, MVP stuff, anything data-driven is essentially allowed. You can use the chat here in the client if you want to raise a live question. You can also use the Q&A function. You can just raise a virtual hand. I'll give you voice, or I'll show you a form after today's session where you can also essentially submit your questions, and it allows me to prepare a very smooth slide as today, essentially. If you receive multiple questions, I will be cherry picking. If there would be no questions at all, I will talk about the cluster. Haven't done anything, so please keep shooting questions, essentially. And we received one. Let me just show it to you. And that's essentially a continuation of last week. And I showed this briefly already by accident because I thought it's related to the previous question. So this, at least my understanding is that this is all about how to model links with null business keys involved. So what we see here essentially is a source table. That's the entity roles table. And there's also a table for projects and for tasks. And the problem is that in this entity roles table, we have some null values for some lines have a null value for project, some lines for task, and so on. But other than that, it's a link. And there's some other keys or codes for entities and roles. Could be descriptive data, could be codes, we don't know. That's what it is. So how do we load this? Because apparently there should be a link involved here between project and task, but then the null values essentially are an issue, I believe. Let me just double check this. Yeah, and there's no logic in there. So yeah, some rows have a project assigned, like this one here, some not. Some have both, some have different projects and tasks, and so on. So how do we do this? So first of all, it's relatively fairly simple, actually. First of all, what I would do is either, and I'm not 100% sure, right, because I don't know exactly the model. If this is like an event, well, it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like an event, essentially. And I believe it's all in the same files, in the same batch. Okay, so it's not an event. Let's assume that at least, because I don't see any event information. I just see assignments and entities and roles, which are, let's consider descriptive data. Doesn't matter if it's a reference code or descriptive data, it would have no impact. And we assume it's all in the same batch. All the data comes in the same batch. In this case, let's deal with the null values here first. That's not a big deal, because if there's a null value involved, what I would recommend is to use zero keys in hubs and links. And a zero key replaces the null value in here. Well, we don't know much anyway. The only thing we know is there's no project assigned to this row here. So we would essentially refer to the unknown dimension member later on. So once you have the zero keys in the hubs and links, combined with the ghost records in the satellites that we have for performance reasons in the PRT tables, that will lead to an unknown dimension member later downstream. And that looks like the right behavior here. So that's the idea. Even a null value would work in a link. It's not nice to have null values, but it's not too uncommon, let's say. It's just that the zero key is more efficient. That's the like query efficient. That's it. That's the thing. Because we can rely on inner joins. It's easy to query. It's faster to join, and so on. And as a side effect, it leads to the unknown member, and that's also nice in a dimension. So this row here would then refer to an unknown project, unknown task, and so on. That's the idea. So that's what I would do first. So that's how we deal with these null values. Just keep them as it is, accept them. I wouldn't split the link. I would just keep it as it is, as one entity, essentially in the source. And then that leads to one link relationship between project and task. That's number one. Now, the problem is that your link is repeating. So which means that in the loading process for a link, you would only have one row for those two lines, for example. Well, and then I'm looking at the ID. The question for me is what the ID is. Let's say it's just a sequence value, surrogate key, essentially technical ID. Most probably I would just keep it like this as a, I mean, you have two choices now. If you consider this more like an event, then you could just add the ID as an ID, as a transaction ID into the non-historized link and keep the granularity as it is. That makes it super easy. If this is like an event, have those as hub references with the zero keys, have this as a transaction ID, and then add those descriptive attributes here, entity and role, which are most probably reference codes, which means there's a reference table that you can use for explaining what's the meaning of role one, or what's the meaning of entity one. So just keep that in the non-historized satellite and you're done. Super easy design. If this is not a non-historized link or a dependent child link, if this is just a standard link, which is fine, all of that is descriptive data. The only problem is we have multiple rows having the same link entry, project 1 to task 1. This is the problem here. So either you consider this as multi-active data, so the satellite would be a multi-active satellite. So we'll go with this one option here, the multi-activity. So you just attach a multi-active satellite to the link, where you essentially capture these different descriptions here. For example, here you see different descriptions here. You just capture as multi-active data. And then downstream, when you build a dimension, you have to figure out what it means. How do you want to query data out of this scenario? That's one option. The other option would be if these are intraday changes. So let's say this is the version 1 of this relationship, and this would be version 2 of this relationship. I would use what we internally call the CDC satellite. That's a standard satellite where we adjust the load date timestamp of the satellite, the primary key, just a little bit. Because the problem is a standard satellite could not capture this data, right? Because it refers to the same parent. That's the problem. So you have two different deltas based on those attributes, but also on the ID, which is just descriptive in this case. They refer to the same parent. So that's why we use either a multi-active satellite if all of these records are active at the same time, or we use the CDC satellite where we adjust the load date. And then you need to know the order of these records, in which order have these intraday changes been produced. And what you want to achieve is that the latest intraday change becomes the latest delta in your satellite. And all the deltas in the satellite are ordered by the intraday changes. So the first delta would be the first, for the first intraday change would be the first delta in the satellite, the last one would be the last one. So that's the basic idea. And you achieve that by adding a sequence as microseconds to the load date timestamp. And the load date timestamp is essentially the load date of the incoming batch, plus 1 for the first row, plus 2 for the second row, and so on. That's how we distinguish those and put them in the right order, put the deltas in the right order as the intraday changes happen, essentially. Remember, the load date is just a technical historization, and there should be, if this intraday changes, there should be some modified date inside the descriptive data behind those dots here. And that you can use for figuring out what's the latest record at 6 p.m. in the evening when they close the office or something, right? That's all never based on a load date. That just indicates when did you receive the data technically. The modified date in the business data, that's what you use for applying timelines and so on, right? For reporting purposes. So that's why it works. So okay, so that's the two options or three options: either non-historized link or dependent chart link, where you keep the grain as it comes in, and then use the ID as TID. Null references we replace typically by 0 keys, and then everything else goes into the non-historized satellite. That's option number one. Option number 2, just a standard link between project and task hub. Again, replace the null values by the 0 key. The 0 key exists in the hub, so the reference will work essentially. And everything else would go into a satellite. Standard satellite wouldn't work, so use either a multi-active satellite or a CDC satellite for capturing intraday changes. And yeah, there's also three options that you have, at least from my view here. And then let me just double check if you captured everything. So should pre-stage and create 2 views to split the table, any roles. No, I wouldn't do that. So I would just keep it as is. And yeah, I never split anything on a row base. So we don't apply any filter from a staging table or pre-stage table, landings or whatever. From a staging table to the row data vault, we don't apply any filters. Give me all the records where something is not now. No. So we always capture it without any conditions from stage to raw data vault. That's what we achieve here. The only thing we do, yes, we replace the null value by an empty string, but that's a technical, I don't know. It's a start process actually. All right, so we don't split the data sets here. That's what you meant here. And no link splitting is not required here, and not separating the rows essentially. Or should I combine task, project, entity? Task, project, entity. So if entity is a hub reference as well, then no change. So you have 3 hubs involved, but my answers wouldn't change. It's just that entity is not a descriptive attribute anymore. And then should I handle a multi-activity? Yeah, multi-active satellite. Should I create weak hub for ID? No, I would just consider this as a descriptive attribute and add it to the satellite attached to the link. That's it. Where should I put the descriptive data in the satellite on the link? Should I put role also in the link? You could, but what I would do is this: you could have a hub if there's a hub for role. Yes, you could also load the hub, even a weak hub. Well, weak hub is not good, not a good term. But you could have a hub just for the business key, for example, and you have no descriptions. The only problem is I wouldn't do that. If that's the case, I would, at least for now, keep the, even if we know this is a business key, keep the business key in the satellite, because you have no descriptions, you have no satellites, no links will refer to the sub role except this one here. So I would most probably keep that in the satellite attached to the link. And then if you ever in the next sprint source another source system where role becomes a actual business key and you have actually descriptions and everything else, then you could still hub it out. So you load the business keys from the satellite attached to the link into the hub role essentially. Longer story, but that's a standard refactoring pattern. So we could easily deal with this. But let's assuming that role is not a hub in your scenario, because you're already only mentioning project, task, and entity, then we'll just keep role as a descriptive attribute in a satellite, and then again multi-active or CDC satellite essentially. Yeah, that's the idea. So those three options you have, and that depends now if it's an event or not, if it's intraday changes or not, or if it's just multi-active descriptions. Giving you a question here, I would assume just a standard link and a multi-active satellite. That's my assumption, without knowing the other data. Yeah, cool. Good question. If you have a question like this, just use this form behind this URL, sfr.ee/EU Friday. That's where you can submit questions. I'm running low a bit at the moment because I believe it's because we're getting in summer and people doing more gardening or what, I don't know. So shoot questions if you want. Now's a good time, and you're getting closer to answering those questions. And if you have other topics more on the tool side of the house, then go for scale2.2/webinars. That's where we essentially announce the Warescape and the DBT sessions. They're once a month. And if you can't wait until next Friday for getting your questions answered, if it's really urgent, then use the Data Innovators Exchange. It's a forum-style community where you can sign up for free and ask a question essentially, and people from both Australia and Germany or Europe will jump on the question as fast as possible because they have a competition going on. And that's like a 24 hours support chain, except on the weekends, right? So that's the idea. So yeah, jump on it and get your answers there essentially. Cool. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining, and enjoy your weekend.